This government meeting is brought to you by Eastworks and our local cable subscribers.
Okay, good evening, everybody. Today is Tuesday, March 1st. It is 6 p.m. You are attending the City Council of Easthampton Public Safety Committee. If you intended to attend another meeting, you're in the wrong one. The meeting is called to order. I see we have, there are two other members here, Councilors Derby and Riley. Today we have a variety of topics to be discussed. The first will be the police department quarterly report, which will also include their yearly report to kick us off. After that, we will discuss the Main and South Street intersection, particularly as it pertains to discussion of a traffic light there. And if we have some time after that, we'll get into our new business, which is a review of use of electric speed signs in town. For those of you who are not familiar with these meetings, I ask members of the public or members who are not council members or speaking to be both muted and to have their video off. If you would like to speak at the appropriate time, please use the raise hand function. If they do not know how to use that, you may turn your video on and raise your hand to the camera. We have some minutes from our last meeting, which was February 3rd. Thank you, Clerk Councilor Riley, for providing those to us. Do either of the councilors have any questions or comments about those minutes? Okay, seeing none, I will take a motion to approve those minutes. We have a motion.
Seconded.
There's a motion and a second. Motion from Councilor Durley, second from Councilor Riley. I will take a roll call vote as we are meeting on Zoom. Councilor Derby.
Aye.
Councilor Riley.
Aye.
And I am also an aye. The February 3rd minutes are approved 3-0. I neglected to mention that we are continuing to meet remotely per ongoing extension of the order from Governor Baker in the midst of the COVID-19 pandemic. At this time, I'll invite any members of the public to make comments for 3 minutes, up to 3 minutes, on any item not on our agenda. There will be ample time to make public comment on agenda items later on when prompted. I'll ask you to use the raise hand function. And seeing none, we will move on. So our first order of business tonight, as mentioned, we have added, thank you to past chair, Councilor Gomez, for deciding to include quarterly reports, discussions from our public safety departments, which generally include fire, police, and DPW. Today we will be having a conversation with our police department. The police chief provided us with an annual report, which I'm assuming the councilors read. I just want to thank him certainly for his time, the efforts of his department over the last year or two, certainly in the midst of the pandemic. It's been even more complicated performing any sort of public service, especially as frontline workers. Prior to turning over the floor to Chief Alberti to begin his presentation, I'll ask the councilors in attendance if either of them have any comments they'd like to make to start.
Oh, thank you.
Councilor Riley?
All set. Thank you.
Okay, seeing none. Police Chief Alberti, again, thanks for attending tonight. I'll open it up to you.
So I'll ask the chair. I know that you had discussed, I can do the quarterly and the fleet first and then get into the report, if that makes sense.
Sure, whatever works for you.
Why don't we do we'll talk about the fleet first.
Okay.
And then, because that way we'll do the fleet, and then we'll do the quarterly motor vehicle stuff, and then you can share a screen for the actual report, and then we can go through the report, if that makes sense.
Great, that's wonderful.
But so first off, I want to thank members of my department. With like anything in policing, even putting a detailed report together, it's a team sport. So I'm here with Lieutenant Scribner, who was instrumental. Sergeant Gribby's on the call. I know Detective Rogalski pulled all of our data from a very antiquated system, as the counselors are well aware, that was an enormous task. And certainly Detective Boyer for his fire and canine reports, and Sergeant Gribby for his use of force reporting. So I'd like to thank them and other members that have contributed as well. So I'll start with our fleet. The chair had asked to do a presentation on the fleet, and by presentation, I'll just explain where we're at with our fleet. We have 9 line cruisers. The average on the 9 line cruisers, the average mileage is approximately 75,000 miles for nine line cars. I usually put in a car every year so we don't run into this situation that we're in now, where I have 2 cars with 100. I have 1 car with 109,000, 1 with 142, 1 with 98, 1 with 92. So we run into, so we're throwing bad money or good money at bad by having to do these repairs. Of those 9 cars, 8 are regular fuel, and we have 1 hybrid. And we do have 1 hybrid that's been on order since last August, after the council appropriated. But with anything, as we all see in the news and media, there's long lead times to get vehicles, and we're no exception to that. And on average, these cars run 24/7, 365, as we all know. And on average, we put between 20 and 25,000 miles a year on any given cruiser. Now, we work hard at rotating the cars among shifts and rotating the cars out so that not one car is running all 3 shifts all the time. So we do a really good job of scheduling the cars so that we try to get the most mileage out of them. Pun intended. So that's pretty much where we are. So we have 1 hybrid on order, like I said, in August, and I'll be coming before the council for an appropriation. We have a grant, as I think the councilors know, for 2 Tesla electric vehicles. So I'll be coming before the council when we get those grants. They're approved. We're just waiting for the green light to order them. So that'll be coming in front of the council for appropriations for those 2 cars. So that'll be very helpful. One of those cars will be an admin car, and the other one will be a dedicated traffic car. And the reason for that is the technology isn't there yet for Tesla to put a light bar on top of the Teslas. As the councilors may know, they're glass roofs on them. And operating at night, we need the light bar to light up any given scene that we have to deal with, to give the police an advantage for officer safety. So those cars will mostly be running during the day and, pre-twilight hours. So that's pretty much an update on the fleet. Any questions on that, councilors?
I just wanted to thank you, Chief, for embracing our hybrid vehicle policy. It's great to see their departments following up on that, being environmentally friendly. Yeah, as the Chief said, are any questions from the councilors here? And are there any comments from the public? No. Chief, while we have you here, I think I've asked you this before, but also just mostly for public record, the hybrid cruisers, any issues there, concerns? Are you satisfied with the performance?
Very satisfied with the performance. Matter of fact, they outperform our gas cruisers, and I haven't had any complaints whatsoever from the officers that have been operating that vehicle. No complaints whatsoever.
Great. And so, Chief, you said you wanted to move on to quarterly statistics for traffic next?
Yeah, so I emailed, maybe you can share this screen, Owen. I emailed this morning. It was an email from Detective Rogalski that I had forwarded that had 2 attachments to it.
Yeah, let me see if I can find those. Hold on.
We're going to get into some more of this in the report itself, but I figured I'd give you an update as to where we are from January 1 to today, as far as traffic stops go.
Yep, I'm loading those up as we speak, Chief, and then I'm going to try to figure out how I'm going to share those.
All right, so I'll preface this with because of our antiquated system, we had to do a specials studies report in our IMC and a dispatch CAD. So when a police officer pulls over a car, the dispatcher will open up a blotter entry. And before that blotter entry, perfect. So before that blotter entry can get closed, the officer has to let the dispatcher know race and gender of the person that they had stopped. So this isn't something that IMC is doing for us. This is something that we're doing on our own. Our new program will do this automatically. So we're pretty excited about that. So every single traffic stop, the dispatcher has to manually close it out by putting in the race and gender of the person that they pulled over. So as you can see, this is a pretty comprehensive report. And it gives, all the reasons, the outcome. Even the state reporting that isn't as detailed as this, but it's labor intensive. So we're happy that the new software is going to do this for us. And any of the community can go in and log into the forward-facing public portal and see this for themselves. They don't have to wait for us to give it to them. So what I wanted to point out, one of the things I wanted to point out is, if you see in the totals from January 1 to March 1st, the total vehicles that were stopped were 431. And that's just in a 2-month window. In 2021, the total vehicles that were stopped were 672 for the entire year. So you can see there's a big jump there. And the reason for that jump is something we'll get into in the report. Is we're in the middle of our traffic grants right now. So I'm sure we're getting all kinds of compliments about how much traffic activity is going on in the streets, traffic stops. But more importantly, we assigned and we reallocated some of our resources, and we restaffed so we could free up a patrol officer's position to be strictly traffic. So Officer William Milkey now does nothing but traffic. He does traffic enforcement, complaint traffic enforcement, motor vehicle accidents. We actually had a motor vehicle accident, a pretty bad one today at Glendale at West Street. And Officer Milkey is doing the reporting on all that. And he does a significant amount of traffic stops. As you can see, based on this, the majority of this would be credit to Officer Milkey in the traffic car. So if Councilor Derby got a complaint of some speeding on Park Street, we're in the middle of putting up on our Facebook page and our website Officer Milkey's email. So you would click on traffic complaint, and the email will go directly to Officer Milkey, and it'll be seamless, and he'll prioritize and get out there. He did the last 2 days. He did crosswalk. We've had a lot of complaints on crosswalks on Pleasant Street in front of INSA. Multiple people have called saying they almost got hit there. So Officer Milkey flexed his schedule last night. He usually works days, but he flexed his schedule to work in the evening. And then this morning, Officer Milkey was in plain clothes, walking back and forth across the crosswalk there. And Officer Jeffers was doing the traffic grant. And so they were stopping all kinds of cars that were violating the crosswalk. So it's been very, very productive, very, very proactive. And as you can see, I'll get back to this form, even in this year's numbers, there's nothing here that really jumps out for me, but I'll take commentary from the council.
Councilor Derby.
I don't necessarily have any commentary. I'm just wondering what BOLO is.
Be on the lookout.
Okay.
So if like Northampton or Southampton or Holyoke, they'll call over our regional channel and say, be on the lookout for X, Y, and Z vehicle that did X, Y, and Z crime.
Thank you for the clarification.
Sure.
Councilor Riley, any questions?
No, I don't think so. I mean, this is, pretty thorough information, and, thank you for providing the extra context around, dedicated officer time specifically to traffic to explain that 431 number, so that it's good to know that we're not all of a sudden becoming incredibly reckless.
No.
So thank you for the context. I appreciate that.
And I'll offer this too. just to add to the context, in 2020 and 2021, we're still right in the middle of a pandemic. So, traffic proactivity was not really, it's a priority, but wasn't a priority due to, people contact. So that's why you'll see even the 2020 and 2021 numbers are down from, like, say, 2018, 2019.
Yep, perfect. Makes sense. Thank you.
Yeah, Chief, I appreciate from a logistical perspective of a dedicated traffic officer. I mean, as you know from emails you get from me, that there's significant traffic complaints in the city. And as you know, we'll have an agenda item on regarding electric speed signs. And then second to that, I think, is pedestrian safety too. So I appreciate Officer Milkey and Jeffers, and Officer Milkey getting his steps in today, doing some little undercover crosswalk work.
Yeah, and that's and I'll end at least the traffic portion with this. For years we've known that we have traffic issues in Easthampton. I mean, it doesn't take much to drive through Cottage Street on any given day, or Union, but we just didn't have the resources to do it. And we did some thoughtful work around restructuring to try to free up Officer Milkey, and some of that is just collateral duties by some of the other day shifts officers chipping in to help out where Officer Milkey would have been doing patrol duties. So the team has definitely stepped up to help us open up this position. And the way we used to do it before, we would complain and we would prioritize it when we could get to it in between calls, and it just wasn't, as effective as it was, it just wasn't as effective enough.
Yeah. Councilor Derby.
I just want to echo my approval of how we're using this for two reasons. We recently updated our crosswalk ordinance to give it a little bit more robustness as we were having some issues. And, the national news is showing on traffic safety data that pedestrian accidents are rising at an exponential rate. So I think this is really important. And I'm really glad that we've gone in this direction. So I appreciate that, Chief.
Thank you, Councilor.
Before we move on from this topic, are there any members, other members in attendance here today, members of the public, that would like to make a comment? Please try to use the raise hand feature if you would like to make a comment. And seeing none, we can move on to our next subtopic. Chief, you want to get into the annual report?
Sure. You want to share that?
Let me see if this works. Does that come up on the shared screen, the annual report?
Yes.
Perfect.
So, councilors, I know that you've read it and digested it. So I'll go through by sections, and I'll hit the highlights for us. But if I don't touch on something in a particular section, by all means, let me know. There we go. So mission statement. So we've revised our mission statement over the years. We've went away from more of a warrior concept to more of a guardian concept. And the guardian concept in policing is since I've been here, that's been our mentality. But our mission statement didn't reflect that. So we were operating under a guardian style, to protect and preserve. But our mission statement didn't say that. So recently we modified it, and you can obviously read it. And our organizational chart is so we have 29 full-time officers. I have 10 special officers, and we'll talk about specials in a little while when we get to the post. We have a clinician on 50% of the time now, and I have my office manager. So 2 civilians, the CSO and my office manager. The rest of the department are all sworn law enforcement.
And I guess since we're going by section, any questions? I'll just ask along the way for the council. Any questions on the section? Okay. So moving on.
And we are up to staff. We're up to full complement. Certainly could use more, but we're up to full complement, and everybody's healthy. I can report. Oh, there you go. I'm jumping ahead of myself. So I'll talk briefly about the specials part-time. So I was a special. Most of my department were all specials. My predecessors were all specials. We get hired part-time. We go through our intense FTO program, and during that time period, when we get kicked loose to work the street after the FTO program, we decide if the new recruit is a good fit, the recruit decides if they're a good fit, or the special decides they're a good fit for us. And that really is our hiring pool. And it's worked well for us for years and years and years. We've never had staffing issues. We've never had hiring issues, recruitment issues. In other departments right now, they're agonizing over it. But I've got 10 people that are part-timers that want to work for the Easthampton Police Department full-time, where other agencies are going to hiring fairs and putting up booths and recruiting. So our system's always worked. I've always said hiring practice and leadership. Our hiring practice has well served us for years and years and years. But now with the post, every police officer under the law, every police officer has to have the exact same amount of training, identical training, whether you're part-time or full-time. So the MPTC and the Post created what they call a Bridge Academy, which all of these part-time police officers have what's called a Reserve Intermittent Academy. And now they have to bridge and get the rest of the curriculum that the full-timers get at the full-time academy. So once these specials get that bridge done, and they have X amount of time to do it, once they get the Bridge Academy done, they'll be certified full-time police officers. So what does that mean for us? What that means for us is these specials can go work anywhere full-time now, because they're already going to be deemed full-time. So when a full-time job opens up in Holyoke, they can go over apply as a full-time police officer without having to go through the full-time academy. So although I have 10 amazing part-time specials, once they do this bridge, they'll wind up being full-time police officers. So it's kind of an unintended consequence of the law. And for me to retain them is going to be difficult as specials, because if they can go get a full-time job somewhere, they're going to jump at that as opposed to just work, part-time shift work for us. So that's very frustrating for us. In addition, the other big piece is I use specials. We pay them $20 an hour, and they augment my patrol force. So if Sergeant Gribby takes tonight off, or he's going to training, I could put a special in his position and not hire out overtime. But with the specials all gone, essentially, my overtime budget's going to go up exponentially, because I still have to fill those shifts, and I won't have the specials pool to pull from to fill those shifts anymore. Another unintended consequence.
Any questions, counselors? Chief, in that regard, do you anticipate with the shift in the way that you were using specials and kind of that going away and moving more towards a full-time officer model, or a need for that, do you anticipate any changes then in the way you're going to have to be staffing in regard to potentially asking for more full-time officers, as opposed to avoid large overtime pay?
Right, and that is the viable that's a viable fix for this. And many departments have gone away from the specials and part-timers due to this exact reason. So, for me I'd have to hire probably 2, maybe 3 more full-time police officers. That'll drive the overtime back down, because then I'll have extra, not extra, but I'll have shift staff where if people take it off, I don't have to fill them. So that is the remedy down the road, but we're probably, I'll say we're probably 1.5 away to 2 years away from that, where I could keep using the specials as they bridge. Mm-hmm. But that is the remedy down the road. Amherst doesn't have specials. I know Hadley's going away from their specials. Wilbraham doesn't have specials. So, the police departments are already moving away from, and the towns and the cities are giving them the extra slots to mitigate the overtime.
And just quickly too, Chief, are there any other anticipated changes to the department or operations based on the post commission. Is this?
Oh yeah.
Or is that too broad of a question?
That's a very countless changes. We went through more than a dozen policies to conform. The post, and I'm just giving you a very brief overview. The post commission's continuously changing policies. They're really moving to a statewide policy set. By way of example, the body worn cameras, we're ready to go with the body worn cameras. We got the grant. That'll be another appropriation. But we have the grant that's going to augment some of the costs. But with the body worn cameras, we have to have negotiate with the union by September in order to keep the grant a policy. But Post has a subcommittee that they want to put out a statewide policy on. So it ebbs and flows. So we could draft our policy with the union, come up with what we want, what the union wants, what works for everybody, and then the Post could come up with something out in left field, and we have to go with the Post policy. And the same thing happened with the use of force. So that there's a lot of and then certification and decertification too. We had to send every single internal affairs complaint that we've ever done to the Post Commission by the end of last year, so they can review all of our internal affairs and say, yes, chief, you should have suspended that officer. Chief, you should have fired that officer. And since you didn't, we're going to decertify that officer now. So the Post is a civilian oversight, and there's no more diverse board than that particular makeup on the Post Commission.
Great, thank you, Chief.
In a nutshell, but there's a ton more.
We could talk offline. Councilors, any other questions on this section? Chief, any other comments on staffing? You want me to move on?
No, I was just going to say we've diversified our department more than any of the chiefs before me. But again, we've hired minority officers as specialists, and they work really, really well with us. And one of them is going to the full-time academy this summer, Abigail Lukasik. And then the open beats per year, this is in a 10-year period. We average about 800 beats open, where we should have an officer. So if somebody takes it off, and we have an unwritten minimum manning. So if somebody takes a beat off, we'll evaluate each shift to see if we're going to fill it or not. And if we don't have to fill it, we'll leave the beat open. But that means instead of running 4 cars, we're running 3.
Great.
But yeah, that's pretty much. And I'll read this last line because I think it's really important. Page 4, where I say we've made great strides in moving the needle in these areas. However, it comes with a cost, not only overtime but morale and mental physical health of our officers. And I don't have to tell anybody on this meeting what this last year has been and done to policing across the country. And it's a lot of stress and a lot of mental and physical health on my cops here in Easthampton too. I just want to point that out.
Yeah, and I see you include the piece. I know I'm just interested in keeping things moving, but I appreciate you including the piece about suicide among police officers. It's important to digest.
Yep, it's extremely important that we had added that in there, and it needs to be read and seen and broadcast.
Anything else in this section, Chief, that you want?
No, I think we're good. The detectives are working; they're working like crazy. I don't envy those guys at all. Community outreach. I've been asked, Chief, how important is community outreach to you? Or I've been told community outreach isn't important to you, Chief. But that's not accurate at all. Community outreach is so important to our police department and community relations with the city and our community that I stood up a position that we didn't have before, which was a community services lieutenant, which is Lieutenant Scribner, who's sitting next to me. I don't know if I mentioned that earlier, but Dennis is here with me. And as soon as we stood that position up, Lieutenant Scribner's been buried from day one. He can't come up for air. That's how vital this position was, and we didn't have it. We didn't know how vital it was until we stood it up and realized, wow. So we do a lot of interaction with the community, a ton of different services, a ton of different groups, as you'll see as we move forward. but I commend Lieutenant. He put in for it. I commend him. I don't know if at the time he knew he was getting himself into, but he's not leaving it now.
Any questions here, counselors? Or comments from the public? Show of hands. Okay. The trends, is that
yes.
a good?
Yep.
Great. Just tell me when to scroll, Chief.
Keep going down a little bit more. So I point a little bit up. No, the other way. Your other up. Yep.
This?
Yeah, perfect. Yeah. So I want to point out, and I did this in my budget narrative last year. Even though we're in the middle of a pandemic, our calls from 2020 versus 2018 in the middle of a pandemic were up over 1,000 calls. And you can see in 2021, our calls pretty much stayed the same. So we're still up in the middle of a pandemic. We're up over 1,000 more calls. You would think, during the pandemic, folks were staying home and, not needing us, but they needed us more in the last 2 years than they did, pre-pandemic. So I just like to point that out. And then the other thing I'll point out is we strive not to arrest any juveniles. So the 8 number for 2021, I just want to point out, were summonses to court, not in custody arrests. That's a last resort. We never want to do it. But I just want to make sure that I pointed that out. As you go through these councils, if there's any questions you have on any particular comparison, I'm happy to answer.
Any questions thus far? I guess I'll ask really quickly, Chief. Do you find any particular calls over the last couple of years during the pandemic that have spiked with the pandemic that seem kind of a unique trend? Sure.
Disturbances are way up. Domestics certainly are up. And you just have to equate it to people staying home and cabin fever to a degree. But those calls for service were definitely up.
Okay. Tell me where to stop.
I'll just keep going as you're scrolling.
Okay.
Obviously, we're still in the midst, and in addition to the pandemic, we're still in the midst of the opiate epidemic. Excuse me. What I want to draw attention to there is we had a bulletin this past week. So a lot of what I'm going to do, council, is just so public safety knows, some of the bulletins that we get I can't share, but there's certainly some that I can share. So when I can share bulletins with the public safety committee, I'll send them to the chair, and I'm sure he'll send them along to you. And one of those that we just received was there's an epidemic now of pills like oxys being laced with fentanyl. They're throughout the Commonwealth now. They're here, and they're certainly here in Western Mass, and I'm certain they're here in Easthampton. So I wanted to give that update as well. In 2021, we had 19 overdose. 2 of those resulted in a death. And I will tell you, if my police officers were not carrying Narcan on their person, that number probably would have been 17 more deaths or close to it. So the advent of Narcan and the police department carrying it on their person, and I credit Sergeant Gribby with that, has absolutely saved lives and will continue to do so. School safety, that's pretty self-explanatory. We're still working with the schools, although we don't have an SRO per se, but we have community police officers that are working with the schools on various topics, in various committees, and certainly they're working in the community with the kids that don't go to our schools, but make choice out there still. So we want to make sure we reach those kids too, because they are part of our community, even though they may not go to school here. Cannabis, it's still a struggle for us to a degree, in that, and I could get into offline, but we're seeing an uptick in the black and gray market significantly, even here in Easthampton, and certainly OUIs with cannabis. We spend a lot of time with the distributors and manufacturers in town. It's very, very time consuming to go in there, inspect prior to them opening, and get the safety plan, get the opening plan. So it is a drain on our resources in our department for sure. But I just wanted to point out that there's definitely a spike in the black and gray cannabis market. So that's something, you know, we have, it's illegal, right? So we're still tasked with addressing it to that end. Go ahead.
Any questions thus far? Chief, I forget, does your department have a DRE?
I have two. Yeah, I have two, Sergeant Gribby and Sergeant Rogers. And they're so good at what they do. And there's not too many of them that they get called out from our neighbors for mutual aid often.
Ready to move down to
yeah. So that what you'll see in the call type summary, this is when a call comes in, the dispatcher will assign what kind of call they're taking. So this is just a summary of Brenda Shoup, our dispatch supervisor, and her team do an amazing job, an awesome job. But this just summarizes the call. See the disturbances, you know, see how they're at 246 compared to like a domestic dispute at 25. So the disturbances were way up last year. Animal complaints is a big problem, which is something that at some point with the public safety committee, I want to address and see where we can go. Right now we use Westfield Animal Control, and we're paying, I forget what the contract is, but we're paying them, I want to say $700 a month. And with the advent of Facebook, we'll get a dog, bring the dog to the state, you know, dog's lost or ran away, or bring the dog station, take a picture, put it on Facebook, and, you know, within an hour, you know, folks are, so we don't need to pay to lodge dogs, I guess is my point. So it's something I'd like to put on your radar that we can discuss further down the road.
I know, Chief, that there's discussions about, you know, Northampton's trying to establish a kennel. Would that, if that happens, would that regionalize?
Yeah, it's interesting you say that. We received a phone call yesterday from the Northampton ACO inquiring about where we were with our ACO program. And they're just polling the neighboring towns to see what we're doing. But again, I wouldn't want, as a taxpayer, I'll speak, I wouldn't want to spend an exorbitant amount of money on a contract, whether it's Westfield or Northampton, it won't matter if that's not the service that we need. You know, maybe we need to hire a civilian, even part-time ACO. But you know, that's a discussion for another day.
I see a hand up from an Omar Gomez.
Yep.
Sir, you may speak.
Thank you, Chief, for this report. I think it's amazing that we have an idea of what you guys are doing day by day. But I have a question about the animal complaints and the noise. First, the animal complaints, and I hear that you said that when someone loses a dog and you guys get it, post the picture on Facebook, but the numbers are really concerning. It's almost 500 complaints about animals. Is something else? Those complaints is because people left dogs outside and barking so loud, and any particular complaint that is more common than others?
Well, yes. So I'll break it down a little bit. And good evening, Mr. President. So the animal complaints also includes wild animals. So it's not just domestic animals. So if there's a rabid fox or a raccoon or a dead animal on the road, they would all go under this category. But I will tell you that the most of the calls that we get are just nuisance dogs, barking dogs. That's the single biggest call. I will say this: in the last 3 weeks, we had to have a hearing on a dangerous dog, and we've got another one coming up on another dangerous dog. We haven't had a hearing on a dangerous dog in 10 years, and you know who used to do them? Salem, you'll appreciate this. Captain Emerson used to do them, and he was the last one that did the nuisance or dangerous dog hearings. That's how long ago it was. But then we've got 3 back-to-back just this week alone. So there's a process to it. We work with the health department. They go out, they'll quarantine the dog, and then, you know, we'll get a complaint, or the mayor's office will get a complaint from a victim of a dangerous dog, and then we'll hold a hearing. And there's certain things under the law that I can implement for a dangerous or you know, nuisance dog up to euthanization. So there's a process to it. But there's a lot of work, and if you polled my entire police department and said, what's the one thing you guys would like to not have to go to, they will tell you animal complaints, and they do a lot, as you can see. They do a lot of them, 473 calls a year. So that's tying up a cruiser 473 times.
Chair recognize. Oh, I'm sorry. Did you have a further question?
Just one more. Thank you, Councilor Sarah. And the noise complaints I see is 139. What is the tools that you guys have? And I know you have, this is response, right? It's people calling because it's too loud. Something is too loud. Could be anything. What is the tools that you guys use to deal with it, right? If something is really loud, besides saying to someone, "Hey guys, you know what? The music is really loud. Can you put it lower?" And I use the music. Again, the noise could be so many stuff that could be really loud.
Could be anything. Right. So the single biggest tool, Mr. President, that we have is discretion. So the way that the mass law reads is it's really at the discretion of the police officer to determine what's reasonable and what's not reasonable. So if your neighbor calls on you, the police go there and it's quiet, they're not gonna do, they're gonna say, they're gonna clear. There's no disturbing of the peace going on here. If they go and there's a house rager and it's 2 a.m, they'll say, everybody out, turn it down. And usually people will comply with that. But when they don't, and it does happen, if we come back, you're going to go to jail. We're going to arrest you for disturbing the peace because we gave you a warning, right? Shut it down, have a nice night. But if we got to come back, now you're taxing our resources again because then we come back out to your house. And now most likely you're going to wind up going with us because we're not going to come back a third time. And that's why I'm a big proponent of the way that the Mass General laws and the tools that we have for discretion when it comes to noise complaints. I don't think, and I would welcome the conversation, but I don't think that an ordinance would help the police department in this realm.
Chair recognizes Councilor Riley.
So in reference to sex offenses that have taken place in the last year, what is the current protocol for the police department? Are you collaborating with nonprofit organizations like anti-violence advocacy groups, or are you collaborating with victims advocates in the DA's office? Can you just speak a little bit more to that? Just so that way we can have some assurance to the public of what specifically is going on with these offenses. Thank you.
Sure. And thank you for the question. It's a great question. And I'll roll sex offenses into domestic violence offenses as well. We do collaborate with the DA's office, and we use their victim witness advocates. And I know the DA's office collaborates with nonprofits. So the police department would work with the DA's office because we're running potentially a criminal investigation concurrently. But obviously, there's victim assistance that needs to be had in all of these cases, including domestic violence. So we work with the DA's office, and the DA's office does outreach with their partners that are nonprofits. So we don't necessarily work with the nonprofits directly, but the DA's office does. We work with the DA's office. We do SANE interviews for children. I'm sure Councilor Riley, I know you're familiar with that, which instead of interviewing a child multiple times by multiple different people, the police, the DA, DCF, advocates, victim advocates, we all get in a room and they have a child interviewer that will interview a child behind glass in a setting with toys and coloring books, and so as not to hurt the child any further than they already are. But we do work with all of those groups. I have a domestic violence liaison officer who does follow-up after we do domestic investigations. We have a high-risk team that domestic violence officer attends monthly meetings where in Hampshire and Franklin County, they have high-risk team meetings, and everybody in these police departments and everybody that participates know who the high-risk folks are in their respective communities. So we are absolutely plugged in with DVIP. We're definitely plugged in on all of the above, Councilor Riley.
All right, perfect. Thank you.
And just to give a shout out, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, Chief, that's the Children's Advocacy Center in Northampton that you use? Yeah, it's a great facility.
It's a phenomenal facility, and they do some amazing work over there.
Any comments here? Can we move on?
Yeah.
All right, seeing none, okay. So these are just statistics. You want me to just keep scrolling?
Yeah, just unless somebody has something. But these are statistics that come into the dispatch center, and then they will flag a particular call in their CAD. And listen, sometimes a call will come in as a disturbance or come in as assist person, and it winds up turning into a sexual assault. So then we would then change them accordingly.
I'm seeing a very large number. Can you clarify the property check?
So what the property checks are is as the officers are on patrol in their respective districts. So we have a north side car, a south side car, a downtown car, and a town-wide car. So the best case scenario is we'd like to run 4 cars a shift to cover those areas. So as they're doing their patrol work, they will, and they do it all from their laptop. They'll do their patrol work, and they'll go through Mill 180. They'll drive all the way around Mill 180. In the midnight shift, particularly, they hit every business in town almost every night. They'll log a property check at Mill 180. They'll log a property check at the Glendale Grill. They'll log a property check at name a business in town, the Bistro. They'll log a property check. And that's why that number is so high. So, and it doesn't take much. They'll drive around, they'll get out, walk, rattle doors, and they'll get back in the car and then close the call. It's that simple.
Any other questions here, counselors? Seeing none, can move on.
So these are the numbers for 2021, as we talked about pretty much the during the other report, which we'll get to more. But so there was 245 crashes in 2021 that needed a report. So again, those are 245 times we have 2 cruisers tied up at a motor vehicle crash.
Just let me know when to stop, Chief.
No, you're good. So this summary essentially is what we would report out to the FBI and the way the FBI wants us to report. So it's called NIBRIS, but it's reporting to the FBI. So the FBI tracks crime, obviously, across the country, including in Easthampton.
Any comments, counselors? Okay.
So crimes against person. So in 2021, we had 5, and I had this conversation with Councilor Riley when he came to visit. A lot of the stuff that the detectives do, it's work nobody wants to do. I promise you, I did it for years, as did Lieutenant Scribner. It's really God's work. But this, and we can't put out to the public the good work that the detectives are doing because of multiple laws that prevent us from discussing these kinds of cases. But what I can put out is we had 5 forcible rapes last year. You can only imagine what one of those cases entails for the detectives and the amount of labor that goes into those cases. So I can't speak enough about how the detective work gets underreported because we can't report it. But I want to take the opportunity and highlight it where and when I can. And this is one of those. This is one of those opportunities. Same thing. Statutory rape. We had 7 of them. And then I don't even know, we had indecent A and B's on kids under 14 was 4. And each one of these is, at least a month-long investigation. So I just wanted to point that out.
Chief, is there anything on the local level that describes either racially based or hate-based crimes that you classify within your system?
Yeah, we have there's bias crimes, hate crimes. They're obviously we haven't had any, but not last year, but they're classified as a crime and you can get prosecuted for them. So that, they're tracked in that manner.
Okay. Any questions here, counselors or members of the public? Show of hands, raise hand feature. I don't see any. Just let me know where to stop, Chief.
And yeah, you can just keep scrolling, but again, go back up a little. I'm sorry, you scroll too fast. You're a fast scroller, counselor. So again, bad checks, right? Detectives, drug offenses, detectives, like those guys. I just want to point out again that that detective unit is burdened. Keep going. I'm sorry. And I will say this as you scroll, a lot of these would normally be detectives, but I will say that our police officers in Easthampton, they take great pride in grabbing a case and running with it to the extent they can during their patrol work. So they help the DB by not kicking cases to them and running them as far as they can and or solving them. And then, you know, they would still run it by the detective lieutenant, Mark Popolarczyk, to make sure that you know, he's satisfied with the work they did and the charges that are coming.
Chief, do you have any general, either preferably not anecdotal, but anecdotal sign, just data on kind of what our crime rate, how our crime rates compare to other similarly sized communities?
I don't have it on hand, but I could tell you that Greenfield, departments our size, Greenfield, Wilbraham, to some extent South Hadley. You know, I had a chief's meeting this morning, and we talk about that, and everybody pretty much is in the same ballpark as far as what they're dealing with and the crimes that they're dealing with. Just go back up for 1 second. I want to point one more thing out. Keep going. We'll get into this in a second. One thing I didn't point out about with the detectives, and I know I wrote it in the section for the detectives, the cybercrime, the child pornography, it is absolutely, when I tell you, out of control. It's unbelievable the amount of cases that are coming into Easthampton, particularly with child pornography. I know they have probably 4 open cases as I talked to you tonight. But I just want to make, and again, this is an opportunity for me to really, you know, obviously pitch the hard work of our department, but with an emphasis on the detectives because they're usually underrated. So this is Detective Boyer. Again, my DB guys, right? He does in addition to having Gino, he also does our fire investigations. So we had 3 structure fires last year, 2 brush fires, which I'm very happy to report. If you scroll down, we had 0 arsons last year. There was not no charges filed and no arsons last year, which is really good. So like the No Fires program that the DA runs with the kids, it's paying dividends. It absolutely is paying dividends. It's a great program. Detective Boyer presented at it this past year, and Officer Mike Briggs sits on their board, one of our officers.
Any questions here, counselors or members of the public? Canine.
Everybody's favorite topic. I was going to put a picture of Gino in this section. Andrew does a lot of work with his canine. He's probably the hardest working canine, in addition to his detective duties. He's probably one of the hardest working canines in Western Mass. He does, as you can see, he does a ton of work. Does a ton of work with Gino. They do a great job. They're a great team. What an asset! I can't. You know, if we could get another grant, I'd get a second one. They do such a good job.
Yeah, and I'll just really quickly say here, I had the privilege to do a ride along with Canine Detective Bollier and Gino recently. Both of them were very accommodating and just really impressed and enlightened as to the role of that unit as well as its origin. So thanks, Chief. Just keep scrolling down here.
Yeah, unless anybody has any questions about Gino and Andrew. I think it would be advantageous for me to give a shout out to Easthampton Animal Hospital. They provide all of Gino's food and vet services at no cost to the city whatsoever. And then Furs a Fly-In grooms Gino every month as a donation. Use of force. So for tools on the tool belt in the use of force world, there's OC spray, which is pepper spray. a baton, obviously hands, and a firearm. In 2021, there was 6 uses of force that were mandated by law to report. Nobody used OC in 2021. Nobody used a baton in 2021. Nobody pulled a firearm out in 2021. And the majority of the uses of force were the, well, I'll call it a taser, which is what everybody knows it as. So if the taser, when the taser came out and we got them, it was a game changer for us. One of the things as we go on, it's on my capital improvement. My officers share tasers when they come in for shift. Like they'll take a taser because I don't have enough tasers to give each officer their own. But one of the things I want to do is assign each officer their own taser. Like each officer has their own handgun, and these tasers are uploaded quarterly, and that information that's uploaded electronically from the taser, whether it's turned on, deployed, everything that happens with that taser is stored electronically, and we have to send those reports quarterly to the state, to EOPS, for their review as well. So where you see displayed, that means, and I think we have it further in the attachments, but I know there was one, I want to say it was a domestic where 2 people were fighting, and the officers get there and they just pull out the taser. They just pull it out. That's it. They don't do anything else. And everybody stopped because nobody wants any piece of that. So they stopped. Years ago, when I first came on, it was submission by pig pile to try to get control of that. We were hands-on, fighting, rolling around. And so with the advent of the tasers, one thing that I can say is it is saving my officers from getting hurt, first and foremost, certainly saving the city money when it comes to officer injured or officer out injured. And certainly my officers, they're not using them like, I think to Councilor Riley's point, like overusing. They pull them out, they put them back. That they have to report that. They pull it out, they put it back, they have to report it. The time that they did use it, which was 2 officers on one call, and it was a mental health call on Strong Street. 3 in the morning, an individual was running down the street nude and just wanted to fight everybody. And he was high on multiple things, including mushrooms. So in order to get this person under control, they had to, what is a drive stun, which means you pull the taser out, you turn it on, and there's a button where you just push it against their skin just to try to get them to comply. And that was the only, and then 2 more displays after that. That was the entire use of force in Easthampton in 2021. I'm happy to report. Any questions on use of force, councilors? Okay.
No, I'll just say that I think it's a testament to the police department's ability to, walk people through situations, and also for the community as well. That's a really promising sign. Yeah. That there hasn't been any conflict between the public and police officers. So it's great to see.
No, Councilor Riley, you're absolutely right. And I'll tell you that you can take great pride in the fact that your police officers are experts at de-escalation. They're really, really, really good at it. Not just in the books, but tangibly on the street. So grants and award, these are just a highlight of a couple grants that we have. A traffic safety grant, which I talked about, or we're in the middle of right now. So that was almost a $20,000 grant for overtime to specifically do traffic. The burn grant, which I was pretty happy we got this grant because it's very, very competitive. And I think this might be the first year we ever got it. We bought an array of equipment with it. And at the time, there was an emphasis on protective equipment for the police officers. So we spent the majority of this money on protective equipment for our police officers. The COPS grant, we're in a 3-year grant with the COPS grant for $125,000. So the COPS grant is paying 75% of our community police officer, Mickey Seeke's salary, and the city picks up 25% of the rest of his salary. So I think we're in year 2 of that 3-year grant. And then of course, the councils are well aware about the CAD IT grant for our upgrade. And then I'll speak about our CSO grant. Emma Riley is our clinician. She's an absolute rock star, amazing. We're super lucky to have her. I know other area departments around here are trying to, and they're not hiding it, they're trying to steal her from us, but I'm digging in. So with our co-response program, Emma works Monday, Wednesdays, and every other Fridays with us. And she goes out in the cruisers and goes on calls with our officers. Once the officers deems a situation is safe, Emma will do her amazing work. We obviously don't put Emma in harm's way whatsoever, but she's there. What we're mitigating is ambulance rides to the hospital. So rather than just arbitrarily sectioning 12 somebody that's in distress, instead of sending them to the hospital for an evaluation, Emma's right on scene and she'll evaluate them. And then Emma will decide, no, they don't need an ambulance, and I'll follow up with them tomorrow. So it's going to decline the trips to the hospital for mental health folks. And as you can see in 2021, and this is in the attachments, we had 568 mental health related calls in Easthampton, 568. And we break them down further down. But, we could easily hire Emma full-time as an employee of the city, specific for co-response. And she does amazing work. And I can't wait to report back to the Public Safety Committee when I get her quarterly report.
No, that's certainly a great addition, and certainly, and as we know, has been identified as a need as community policing evolves. So thank you, Chief, for incorporating that to your department. Any other comments here? All right. You want to get into your accomplishments, or you want to talk about any more grants, Chief?
No, I mean, I'll definitely mention we have 3 DART officers now. And what the DART officers do, so it's drug addiction response team, excuse me. If we have an overdose, these officers, when they're working shift as a collateral duty, they will go and follow up with folks that need help. And it's been a great program. And as far as the accomplishments go, Counselor, I'm happy to, I know you guys have read all of this, but I'm happy to answer any questions with regard to, presumptuously, we're a pretty accomplished department, and I'm very proud of that. And it's the members of the department that make that happen.
Any comments here at all? Okay.
I gotta give a shout out to President Gomez. We did several honorary escorts from the Hoyok Soldiers Home of veterans that had passed during COVID. So we're thrilled to death to do that. We did Undoing Racism. Obviously, we worked in conjunction with the Mayor's Pledge with the City Council on that. All of our liaisons, recruitment, triad, social media. I will say public records. We do our own public records, but the city could almost hire a full-time public records person. It's just, there's so much work and it's so involved. But we get public records almost every single day. Obviously, we have a very successful Marine unit. We run the CERT in conjunction with the fire department, Healthy Youth, Community Outreach Task Force. Essentially, anything that anybody ever asks us or of us to help out, we jump in with both feet. We love doing, as much as we love, the police service, we absolutely love engaging with our community partners and different programs. And I can't remember a time that we've said no to anything ever that wasn't, too outlandish or super expensive. Goals and objectives. Essentially diversifying, obviously. Post is going to be a challenge for us in the coming year, this year. Training is another issue. I'll mention training just for a second. My training overtime budget is already pretty much gone. Training overtime is a challenge. And this is my officers, if I don't have to fill a shift, say I have 4 working a midnight shift and it's a Wednesday night, and one of my officers wants to do training the following day, we'll pull them off their shift. They'll run with 3 officers, and that officer will just go to training and not take overtime. They don't have to do that. If they want the training, they'll come off shift and move their schedules around, so I don't have to pay them overtime. But my overtime line item is already shot, even with all of the officers still doing that. And a lot of it is, in-service mandated, state mandated, unfunded mandated training. But we try to get as much training in as we can, and we try to do a really good job of being creative on how we can get through the training and not costing the city any overtime. I'll go back up one. I'm sorry. One of the things that I think we need to start looking at as we continue to move forward is the grant that I have for the community police officer. We may not get that grant after 3 years. So one thing we should look at is absorbing that grant into the budget as we move forward during the budget next year. Again, anything we can do to engage the community, we're happy to do it. Wherever we can provide police services. We talked about the cruisers. My capital plan is submitted. I'm sure the council will get that. De-escalation tools, body-worn cameras, Celebrate, which is basically it's a computer program where you plug in somebody's phone and it images the phone for evidence purposes. Officer Mike Briggs is a Celebrate technician, but we don't have our own program. So we would have to try to get it either from the DA's office or some other department that does have it, which is often challenging. So that's something that's in my capital plan.
Chief, what are bowler wraps?
So you'll see that's in the capital. I would highly recommend that you Google and watch some videos. Essentially what it is, it looks like a taser, but it's not. It's a handheld device that when you push the button, it has it's a long string. It's like, I want to say it's like Teflon, but it's a long string and it's on, the ends are like fish hooks, for lack of a better word. And when it shoots out, so you can shoot it at somebody's leg. So say somebody's got a knife and you don't want to either tase the person, you don't want to hit them with a 40mm sponge, but you want to subdue them. You would shoot this bowler wrap at their legs, and all it does is just wraps around their legs and renders them immobile. And by the time that happens, they're like, what just happened to me? And then, the officers can subdue them. It's another great non-lethal tool that would work very well in a multitude of, and I'll say it's particularly in mental health calls, where you can't get close to somebody and you certainly don't want to hurt them and you don't want them hurting themselves or somebody else. It's a pretty neat tool. It's state-of-the-art, it's brand new. I know Springfield just purchased some, Hadley just purchased some. They're not super expensive, but it's another tool in the tool belt of an officer to not have to use additional force. As a matter of fact, in the force continuum scale, the state has basically put that in like a contact area. So it's like basically putting your hands on somebody. And then certainly policies, which we're up against constantly, particularly, we've been updating our own policies for years and years and years, because some of our policies, I don't have a full-time policy officer, so it's really me and the lieutenant when we can get to it. So we're constantly updating and evolving our policies. And with posts, we had a deadline to do it. So we got a lot done in a short amount of time. And I put at the very last thing is we've been kicking around the idea of a comfort dog as well.
So do you want to expand on that briefly, Chief? Like what that be used for?
Yeah, essentially, if we go to a situation where a child is victimized, or there's not even a child, adults, or there's some sort of crisis call, something really, 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 really bad, we could bring a comfort dog in, and Greenfield has a great program. We could bring a comfort dog in. Everybody wants to pet a dog, and it really relieves people's anxiety and it puts them in a better place, even in that moment of time. And the programs that I've seen are very, very successful. They're very well received, and I could definitely see a need for it here in Easthampton.
Councilor Derby.
I just want to put my 2 cents in for the comfort dog, because we had one here in Northampton, and it would come to the school, and it was great, and the kids loved it, and it was just it was also like a really good gateway for having a positive interaction with an officer too.
Yeah.
And I do want to just thank you, Chief. And this has been really informational, and I appreciate the time you took to do this report. Unfortunately, I have to run. My team has our first state playoff game.
Oh, nice.
And I don't want to be late. So I apologize that I have to run. And thanks again, Chief and Councilor Zaret. I will catch up with you to make sure that I didn't miss anything too important. So appreciate you guys.
Good luck, Councilor.
Yep. Take care.
Thank you, Councilor.
Bye.
Yeah, Chief, I was just going to say too, I could think of some particularly difficult council meetings where if you had a comfort dog, I would definitely look to take advantage of that service.
Our chaplain, Father Bill Hamilton, used to have one, and they actually requested that he go down to Newtown, and it was very, very well received and necessary at that time. So programs and services, I just broke down the patrol responsibilities. Criminal investigation we touched on with my detectives, and certainly administration and communications. Our 911 dispatch is overworked and understaffed, and they do amazing work with what they have. They're the first line of communication for all of public safety. Certainly, I just can't speak enough good things about the hard work that Brenda and her team do in there. And again, 24/7, 365. You're not calling 911 and being put on hold or no one's answering. So they deserve a ton of credit.
Yeah, certainly kudos to your entire department, both the officers and support staff. I do have to say that the Easthampton Police Department has been really present in a positive way on social media in terms of informing the public in regards to their operations, successes, and events that they're holding. I think we're kind of getting into the appendix of this now. Is that correct?
Yeah. So these are the attachments. So this report it's mandated under my policies for bias-free professional policing. So we have to break down per our policy and the state law, our citations. So this is 2021. We kind of covered this when we went through the motor vehicle stuff, because you can see the 672 stops for last year. And like I said, already this year we're at 431. And you can see it's broken out. I think, Councilor Zaret, this might be a good opportunity to point out that we don't compare these percentages with the people that live in Easthampton. Because we don't just stop people from Easthampton, right? Matter of fact, this is another attachment we'll get to that the state did, and we stopped 40% Easthampton residents, 60% out of Easthampton residents. So to compare, the Easthampton Hispanic populace versus the citations or stops that we did on the Hispanic populace, it's not a fair and accurate presentation of who we're actually stopping.
Do you want me to scroll down to that? Because I know this was a topic of discussion that came up with the mayor's pledge, and I think it's important to, so.
And I know you're well-versed, Councilor, in the, let's see. Yeah, we already went through this. This is the same, you put that on screen earlier. Here we go. So I'll give a little background on this. So this document came from all of the citations that we sent into the state. We sent every single citation into the state, whether it's a written warning, criminal citation, or arrest. Every citation that gets written, we have to send to the state, and we do send to the state. By my memory serves, I believe this was February 2020 to December of 2020. So these numbers wouldn't jive with our 2021 numbers, because it's obviously a different year and different time period. But it's important. So at the very top, you can see in-town motors for 40%. So the state, and I'm hoping our new system tracks this as well, but the state was tracking who got cited, whether it was verbal, written, or otherwise, that lived in town or were passing through. And 60%, as you can see, were passing through. So that's where it kind of skews when you try to compare the percentage of people we stop versus the percentage of that particular race that lives in town. It just doesn't, it's apples and oranges.
Yeah, you could see that down here with the differential.
And then just to go back up for a second. So all stops. So this is strictly Easthampton. So all stops, and the ITP stops, if you're wondering, it's in I want to say in between twilight, I think. So it's like dawn and dusk. They even break that out. And then go ahead, Counselor. Did you want to, Counselor Zara, did you want to speak to the VOD?
Yes, you can still hear me because it looks like somehow I got signed out. Okay.
I got you.
All right. President Gomez, there's not another meeting, is there? Okay. So I know that this came up, and I think this will be helpful for the public watching. There was discussion about traffic stops, what's known as the veil of darkness. So is that farther down?
Yes. Right. Oop.
There.
Yep, there you go. The reason I attach this attachment, counselors, is because it does a really good job of explaining what the state did with their data and how they come up with what they come up with for every single city and town in the Commonwealth. That wrote more than 100 tickets.
When we get down to the data, Chief?
Yeah, I mean, do you want to explain what the veil of darkness analysis is, Counselor Zare?
Sure. So there is I believe that there was it's been studies that have been done in various places, but I know that Texas specifically did one, and this is a study that could help potentially to demonstrate if individuals are being stopped based on racial bias, racial profiling, by trying to prove or the hypothesis that officers, if they're looking specifically for racial identifiers such as the color of someone's skin, are stopping them more during daylight, because you could see those distinguishing features during daylight versus darkness. So these veil of darkness studies, essentially the hypothesis would be that more people of color would be stopped during the daytime, and then you would see a decrease in those stops from during dusk and into nighttime, where those stops would probably be more equal to white motorists. And this has been, in certain communities, this has been demonstrated to be true, which is problematic.
Right.
But we didn't have, this was something that came up certainly during the mayor's pledge. I think we didn't have it available at the time, and It was a valuable discussion to have. And so I guess I could turn it back to you, Chief. So we do have some data here.
So when the state evaluated, actually, if you want to go up to that yellow highlighted sheet, Councilor Zare. So when the state evaluated Easthampton during that time period, you see the VOD analysis there. So all stops during that time period, there was 72% non-white during the daylight, 92.8% white. But to Councilor Zaret's explanation of the veil of darkness, in the dark, when you can't see the driver, it was 13% non-white and 86% white. So those are important numbers, and they're meaningful, certainly for me, and they're meaningful for our community. And to the state, as you can read below, non-white drivers more likely to be stopped during the day than at night. So I thought that was pretty significant. This is the same, you probably saw in the media, this is the same reporting that both Ludlow and Hadley got gigged on. This is the exact same report. But, our police officers are doing a great job and stopping speeding cars.
Is there anything else here at all, Chief? Oh, I'm sorry, Councilor Riley, you have it up.
Yeah, that's okay. So if we could just scroll back up to that really quick. There's a point that I want to clarify and to make sure that's being made. So in the section here, VOD analysis, all stops, down at the bottom here, the odds ratio greater than 1 indicates non-white drivers are less likely to be stopped during the day than at night. We are less than 1 here, correct? With the 0.6 29.
Correct.
So is what this statistics are saying here, does that mean that we are not, that this is not happening in Easthampton? Is that correct?
That's
that we
correct.
are not disproportionately targeting people of color?
Absolutely, 100%, Councilor Riley.
Okay, all right, perfect. I just wanted to make sure that sometimes statistics language can be a little opaque. So for the public to understand, I just wanted to make sure that that was highlighted.
Well, I think, and to that end too, I think you'll see there's more warnings. There's more verbal warnings or warnings themselves going out, to non-white drivers, which I think is important as well. What I don't think this captures. Well, we capture it, verbal warnings. We capture the verbal warnings because like I said earlier, our special studies, the dispatchers have to, even on a verbal warning, they still have to put in what the race and gender of the driver was. So the state's not capturing verbal warnings. We're capturing it. And the last point I'll make along this line, which I didn't know we could do, but again, it's Detective Rogalski and his due diligence, and it was not easy. We can actually run a report by officer to see in any particular given period what officers are stopping what races and what genders. So if we thought we had a problem officer, we could easily run a report to either verify it or disprove it.
And is this pretty much the end of?
That's the end of the. Keep going. This is just that same report, Councilor Zarrett. This just explains the report out. That's all. But I thought it was important to put in there for the council and the public. We already touched on the use of force, but these are the specific calls. So I'll just read sideways. So one was a physical altercation. One was a failure to stop motor vehicle violations that wound up being an arrest. The nude intoxicated person I spoke about. A restraining order violation was the next one. And then a suicidal person was the last one.
And the other thing I'm just briefly seeing here too, that is that these few incidences are distributed across a different officer for each one. So there's not a single officer in the department who is more associated with use of force than others.
Correct, exactly, right.
At least based on this data.
Yeah, and our use of force reporting is pretty significant. The officer has to do a report. Their supervisor has to do a report. Both of those reports get submitted to the use of force officer. Excuse me. Then it gets forwarded to the lieutenant, to the captain, and then me. So there's a lot of eyes going on these use of force reports. Mental health. This breaks down Emma Riley and her amazing work. This breaks down the mental health related calls. Like I said, there was 568 in 2021. But this further breaks down like what kind of calls. You can read it, but what was transported, what wasn't, and really objectively, what we're trying to do is we're trying to drive down the number of folks that are transported when Emma can do an evaluation rate on the scene and determine that no, they don't need to go to a hospital. And I'll follow back up with them. It's been very well received by my police department. Absolutely adores this program, and they think the world of Emma. And the public the community has absolutely wrapped their arms around this program. And then I just because I put into the report the officers killed in the line of duty and the suicide, I just wanted to back that up with documentation from the Bureau and from. But that all speaks for itself, Councilor.
Yep. And this is all the same.
Yep. That's a suicide. No, those are leading cause of death. So if you have an opportunity, it's interesting to see as you go through the attachments. It's very interesting, and certainly the line of duty deaths this year, were significant medical, right, because of COVID. But there's still a lot of violence against police, a significant amount.
Oh yeah, COVID.
Yep. And these numbers are sobering, particularly for the men and women of the Easthampton Police Department that do this work, they provide this service. And I think that's the end of it, Councilor.
Yeah, and Chief, you're available for a little while longer because I would like to talk about the stoplight. So first of all, I just want to thank you. First of all, any comment from the member of the committee or the other counselor in attendance?
I guess the only thing that I would ask is, do you know where the public would be able to access this PDF if they were interested in looking at this information themselves? Because I know that it took me a lot longer to read through this than time we had for presenting today. So, you know, is there a spot on the website where this is going to be posted, or is it on the city government website?
It is going to be on both. I wanted to go through the public safety committee before we put it out, but it's going to be under statistics and annual reports on our website.
Okay.
And we're also going to upload it to our social media as well.
Perfect. Okay. Thank you so much.
President Gomez, any comments?
Yes. First, to answer to Councilor Riley, the other way that we can do it is to add it to the minutes. Mm-hmm. So that way people will have access to the minutes for the report. First, I want to say thank you to the chief. I think this report is amazing. Like I said before, even when we disagree, I always start saying that my dad was a state police, right?
That's right.
I want to put that on the record, that I know how hard is you guys' job. But that doesn't mean that we have to agree with everything.
That's right.
And that we are not going to question the data, because sometimes the data can be manipulated, right? Sure. And it's our job to make the toughest questions. Yep. But again, I think you guys are doing a great job. I think the police department is doing an amazing job. And I hope now the mask mandate is lifted, and see you guys more around to start having like a coffee with a cop again.
Absolutely. Yep.
Doing some stuff so that the community will know you guys and know that the new policemen that we have in our great city. And I'm gonna challenge you. The fire department invite us to have a night with the counselors. So I'm expecting that you guys are gonna do the same and show us by firsthand what you guys are doing ready to face them, and drive us through a lot of situations and show the hard work that you guys do every day. By the way, I appreciate it.
Thank you. Yeah, we absolutely plan on doing that. And I'll offer, and I've offered many times, but I would highly recommend the counselors pick a time that fits their schedule and come out and do ride-alongs with your police officers.
Thanks, Chief. Any members, anyone else in attendance want to make any comments at all? Preferably using the raise hand feature, or a show of hand if you can't use it. Okay, seeing none. And I also want to thank you, Chief. This was a great presentation. It went much longer than I promised Councilor Derby would, but I think it was as long as it needed to be. And especially with me chairing a committee, it could have certainly been longer. So I held my tongue a lot, tried to ask questions when they were needed. I think the next and last agenda item we'll get into is the discussion about the Main and South intersection, particularly the need for a traffic light there. And I know Joni Bella is on the call. Here, I'm just going to stop sharing because there's not much to share here. Joni Bella is on the call and has been incredibly patient, but I hope well educated as to the functions of our police department. And so, Joni, I'll just invite you to talk a little bit. I'll introduce you by saying that I'm very grateful for your advocacy as a resident in collecting over 1,000, close to 2,000 signatures. You can tell me the exact number soon. Just to speak a little bit about why you're so invested in this infrastructure piece. Speak a little about the work you're doing, and then I'm going to have some questions, and I'm sure the rest of the committee will too, for the chief in terms of kind of the police's opinion about the need or the lack of need for a light at this intersection. So Joni, thanks for attending, and go ahead.
Sure, absolutely. I found it very interesting. Thank you, Chief Alberti, for your report. I have a brother who's a police officer, and my 7-year-old's already trying to figure out how he's going to be a police officer and a firefighter at the same time. So I thank you for keeping us all safe. I appreciate it. And I'm really glad our meeting lines up so that we can have a discussion together about the idea of a light. So as many of you know, earlier in the year, we started collecting signatures to show support for the idea of a traffic light at the intersection of South and Main. I'm a resident on Paul Street, so it's not far from my house, and an area where I avoid currently, but I'm going to be headed quite often in the next 7 years or so, headed to school. So I know I'm not alone, and that's kind of what prompted me to take the bull by the horns. And so we started collecting signatures, and I have gone through all of them. I've eliminated all of the out-of-state signatures that we received online. And I also went through all of the hand signatures and eliminated anything that was illegible or otherwise invalid for some reason. And we have over 350 signatures in hand, plus an additional 996 that were obtained online for a total of 1348. Of those, 448 are Easthampton residents, and 135 more are residents of Northampton, Southampton, and Westfield. So the online petition was posted on change.org and was really an efficient way to gather signatures during the winter and during a pandemic where people were kind of reluctant to answer their door, especially to somebody they don't know, and people were reluctant to go out and get signatures. So I wore my clear mask as an audiologist so people could read my lips, but somebody thought I had cut a hole in my mask. So fortunately, we were trying to be as safe as possible, but the online was really an efficient way to gather some support and show some momentum that way. So I have a couple of comments. People were able to write a comment when they signed online. Councilman, you can let me know if that's okay to read a couple of them. I don't need to if time is of concern, but.
Yeah, why don't you read a select few? Sure,
absolutely. So one woman wrote, "This intersection is truly dangerous, and it's puzzling that the DOT insists on looking only at traffic counts and ignoring the number of accidents. I rarely traverse it, but still caught an accident on my dash cam. I live nearby, but avoid it as much as possible, both when driving and walking. Our town has grown and traffic is much different these days. The businesses would also benefit from having safer egresses for their customers. Please, let's fix this." Let's see. I used to live in that neighborhood and was one of the reasons I was relieved to move. The state of that intersection is too dangerous. I bicycle through that intersection. It is dangerous to try to cross because of the speed people are going on Main Street. And my last one, my husband was in a serious accident here 2 years ago that totaled our vehicle. Thankfully, he is okay. We now go out of our way all the time to avoid this intersection, even though it's only 1 mile from our house and it would otherwise be very convenient. A traffic light is greatly needed here. So that's just a few. I have like 5 pages of comments, and I certainly won't go into any more, but I think it just kind of highlights where people are coming from as far as their interest goes. And I know this has been a long-standing concern for a lot of people, and it was interesting to read some of those comments online, like, well, this should have been happening 30 years ago, or there's accidents here a long time ago. And so I think what was very interesting in the beginning was I found out that I had called the mayor's office and a neighbor had called another department. And so one person was making a call to different departments, and it wasn't necessarily adding up to much. So this is really our opportunity to come together and voice the need and the importance of this initiative to try to make this intersection safe for everybody passing through, whether it's in a car on South Street or on Main Street, or crossing on a bike or as a pedestrian. And we know that Officer Milkey and others are really working on keeping our traffic patterns safe, but this is just a tough intersection that's not even, you know, those easy 90 degrees. And so I definitely would like to hear what Chief Alberti has to say and what everybody else has to say, because I'd like to see this continue to move forward, and hopefully we can get some support and funding at the state level and talk to the people we need to gather some funding. And I know this is not going to happen overnight. I'm in it for the long haul, and I'm happy to participate in any way that's helpful, but that's kind of where we are. I feel like we're off to a really great start, and I'd like to just see it continue to move forward.
Thank you, Joni. So I'm going to, at this time, first, I'll just allow the member of the committee and the other counselor on the Zoom to address Joni directly if they have any questions or comments they'd like to make.
No, I'll basically just say this. You know, I was not familiar with the situation at this intersection. I live in a completely different part of the city. Once it was brought to my attention by Councillor Rist, it was almost like clockwork. Shortly afterwards, there was a pretty significant accident at that intersection. And as I've been paying attention to the work that you've been doing and other community members have been doing, to me, this is an issue that I want to put our full support behind. Right now, I don't know specifically what that looks like, but you know, I definitely want to urge all members on City Council to you know, exhaust every possible avenue to make this come to fruition, because you know, this is a public safety issue, and it seems like it's been going on for quite a while, and unless we fix it, it's not going to stop. So I just wanted to say thank you for doing the work that you're doing.
Councilor Gomez, President Gomez, did you have any comments while Joni's here?
Yes, thank you, Councilor Sarek. By the way, I'm part of this committee because Salem is out, so I'm the third member now. I serve 2 terms in the Public Safety Committee, and I'm not serving this committee anymore, but this particular intersection, it's a project that I have in my heart, right? And you can see some improvement for the past few years, like the sidewalk now next to the store, the crosswalks. So we're trying little by little to improve that intersection, and I know it's not enough, right? My daughter lives really near that intersection, and I know how dangerous it is. And I'm the first one to try to avoid the intersections, but turning left in South Street, it's crazy. I'm gonna support you. I'm supporting the efforts with the state rep, the senator, the mayor, the Councilor Rest, and creating this amazing team. I think we're gonna see results eventually there.
Thank you, councilors. And yeah, the goal of putting this into an actual agenda item, obviously, was so we could discuss it in open meeting, as well as kind of, you know, create a little bit more organization. And thanks to all the work that's already been done on this, you know, get some input from department leaders and stakeholders, and then kind of synthesize that into some more action. So on that note, we're fortunate to have the chief here, if you didn't notice, for the last hour and a half. And I just wanted to turn it over to him, just in terms of thoughts, as well as, I know, Chief, we discussed some statistics, and I apologize, I didn't ask you to bring those, but I know we have some generalized, and if you have them, that's great. But just want to know your thoughts about this intersection, and you know, certainly the need, if any, for a light, as well as just general ideas.
Sure. I'm happy to provide some input. So I have firsthand experience at that intersection on multiple calls over my career, some really, really bad, a motorcycle in particular. I would also say, as a chief of police, I've sat at that intersection at South Street and either took a right to go down Main Street and make the flip, or take a left to go down Main Street to make a flip, because I'm like, there's no way I'm going to cross this intersection, you know, at any given point in time. statistically, I don't have the information in front of me tonight, but what we do know, and I can speak to off the top of my head, is this intersection has the most accidents of any in the city, even more than Loudville at West, which we had a pretty bad one today. I sent the counselors a video of that earlier. The intersection that was worse than this was West Street at Northampton. But as soon as the state put the light in at West at Northampton, the accidents plummeted. I think we had maybe not even a handful. So clearly the light does work. You probably get some pushback maybe from the state or from some folks that, well, it's going to bog up traffic because now there's another light on Main Street. The reality is, they said the same thing on Northampton Street, and there's been zero effect on the log jamming of traffic. And if you think about the stretch of road between Main and Union and where this proposed light would go, there's a significant length of roadway there. And there's technologies too, where the lights can change when there's cars approaching south. So the technology is there to keep the traffic moving along. So that really shouldn't be much of an argument. Funding obviously is the single biggest piece. I sent a letter in support to the state. Their reply essentially was, we talked about this with the mayor years ago, and we told her that that's your intersection, it's not ours. Apparently their intersection starts like right where the light ends. So really it's just going to come down to funding, and I'm happy to lobby Senator Vilas and certainly Rep. Carey, along with our counselors and mayor's office, because I do think it's an important intersection, and it's a public safety concern of certainly the police. And as I said, I've been to pretty horrific accidents while working at that intersection that they're quite memorable. So this has been a long time coming. I know Councilor Rist, Councilor Derby, we've had meetings on this years ago. Same exact intersection, same exact issues, and I think that this grassroots community organizing, moving this forward, is just amazing and much appreciated by me and my department.
So Joni, I see your hand up. I'll get to you in a second. I just want to address. Thank you, Chief. Any comments to the chief from the members of the committee? And so Joni, I'll take a public comment from you, and then I could relay that to the chief.
I have the statistics if you'd like me to go over that, if that's helpful. That were from the police department.
Sure, I'll give you the floor. Yeah. That's great. Yeah. Thank you.
Okay. And so from the time period of, this is what I have in writing, from the time period of January 1st, 2001 to November 21st, 2021, there were 74 accidents. There was an additional accident on Friday, December 17th of 2021, and we had one a couple weeks ago. So that would bring us up to 76 over the last 21 years. And then that's at South and Main. So I have the statistics for Northampton and West Street. And so from the time period of January 1st, 2001 to December 31st, 2013, prior to when the light was installed, there was a total of 68 accidents. The light was then installed, and from January 1st, 2014 to December 1st, 2021, the total was 17 accidents. So there was a significant drop after that light was installed. Thank you.
Joni, thank you for that info. Chair recognizes Chief Alberti.
Thank you, Chair. Councilors, I sent in your email, Detective Rogalski's still on the call, so he just emailed me those stats. So I just resent them to you guys, so they're in your inbox. Thank you, Detective Rogalski.
Joni, is your hand still up, or it is not? Okay. Discussion. Any input from the committee? Councilor Riley or Councilor Gomez? No. So the purpose, again, I think the goal here is, we're going to take input from different department heads and stakeholders. We fortunately had the police chief in the department already on the agenda to get the ball rolling. Our next meeting, our next quarterly report slash potentially annual report will be with DPW next month. And I'm going to reach out to them in terms of trying to get a better estimate on costs so we can have that discussion in a public setting. Because certainly, as everyone here and the chief touched on, I think it's not a question of, it doesn't appear that's a question of need, and certainly not a question of desire, but it's a question of money, and we have to start figuring that out. We have to know how much this is cost the city, and then try to figure out where that money is going to come from. So I'll ask Director Nuttleman to try to give us some estimates. I've received some, but they haven't been formal, and I'm going to see if we can get something that's closer to what we can expect to spend on this project. So that being said, Chief, do you have any more comments for the evening?
No, other than thank you for having me, and I applaud my department and their hard work, and the team that we assembled for this this report out. So thank you, everyone. Much appreciated, and thank you for your time, counselors.
Thanks, Chief, for all you do.
Take care.
Any other members of the public want to make any final statements at all? Seeing none. Again, one more time for the counselors before I ask for a motion to adjourn. Any other comments? And I'll take a motion to adjourn.
I will make a motion to adjourn the meeting.
Okay, we have a motion from Councilor Riley. Do I have a second?
I'll second it.
Thank you, Councilor Gomez. So we have a motion from Councilor Riley and a second from Councilor Gomez, sitting in as his duties as Council President. Thank you. I'll take a roll call vote. Councilor Riley.
Aye.
Councilor Gomez.
Yes.
And I am also an aye. Motion to adjourn passes 3-0. Thank you, everyone. Thank you to the police department. Thank you, Joni. We could talk more between meetings. This meeting is adjourned.
This government meeting is brought to you by Eastworks and our local cable subscribers.